welcome to our presentation about stress and anxiety, and then talking about, of course, ways to kind of be resilient and work on coping with that. So Jeannie and I work at ECHN, but we're not in the hospital. So we work for Adult Behavioral Health, which is on 150 North Main Street. So it's just right around the corner, but not to be confused, we're not in there.
So I think one important thing is to figure out what the difference between stress and anxiety are, because sometimes we use those terms interchangeably and they are a little bit different. So we'll start off with just going through what the differences between the two are, and then we'll talk about different ways to cope, different things we need to do for our lifestyle to reduce stress and anxiety. What is stress? So stress is our natural response to difficult situations, basically. So if you read over this slide, one of the ways that we can often feel stress is sometimes we'll have worry related to stress, something difficult going on in our lives, so we are worrying about it. We're all going to experience stress at some point in our life. There's pretty much no way to avoid that. So just understanding that this is a natural thing that will happen if we have something difficult in our life. And the most important thing is to build up resiliency to stress, just so that we have it. And how well we manage stress depends on how significant the stress is and what coping skills we have. So if it's a larger stressor, so let's say if it's a natural disaster, that's going to be a harder one to deal with than, let's say, you're running late to work. So there's going to be different ways to manage those two different stressors, but they are both stressors. And so, yeah, we want to develop coping skills to make sure that we have some resilience to stressful situations. Stress is not good or bad. And I think that's in and of itself, it is not good or bad. And we can experience stress from good things as well as bad things. So an example of a good stressor might be, trying to think. I don't know, you're planning a party. You're looking forward to this party. You're super excited for this party, but planning a party is really stressful. So even if you have all sorts of positive emotions wrapped up in it, you think this is going to be a great thing, the actual process is difficult. So you need to manage that part of it. So we always like to say good stress is still stress. So it's an important thing to remember that it's not really good or bad. It's just how we handle it. Everyone reacts to stress differently. I'm sure we know this, but being mindful of that, because I think sometimes we can get the idea that someone's coping right and I'm coping wrong, or I'm coping right and they're coping wrong, whatever's happening. We just have our stress reactions. So we have to just be aware of what they are in that moment and figure out how to manage them best for ourselves with as little judgment towards ourselves and others as possible. So trying to just understand, I think the most important thing is understanding what your stress reaction is, so that you know how to deal with it, and not trying to judge whether it's right or wrong. Just, okay, this is what it is. How do I handle it? So I think it's important to understand some stress can be avoidable. So when I'm talking about, let's say, example I might have is, so unavoidable stress may be like the death of a loved one. You get a horrible illness. Any of those things are unavoidable stressors. They can happen. We don't know when they're going to happen, but if there's nothing we can do about it. But some things are a little bit avoidable. So if you have a lot of stress related to your morning routine, because maybe you get up a little bit too late every morning, that might be one that you need to maybe handle and figure out, okay, the reason that I'm stressed every morning is because I've hit snooze 3 times. It's not because there's anything else going on. So maybe I need to figure out how to manage my mornings a little bit better, change that up so that I'm not having that stress in the morning. So it's important to kind of step back and see if we're experiencing a lot of stress related to something. Are there things that I can do to make this a little bit better? And that's sometimes something that you can ask yourself. And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. But asking that question is an important thing to start off. And it's important to understand that stress can make mental health conditions worse. If you have depression or anxiety or any other mental health condition, you might have a harder time with stressors, but also stress in and of itself can cause depression and anxiety, just depending on what is going on in your life. So I think it's important to understand that they can interact with each other. So stress definitely has an impact on those things, even if it isn't the same as those things. So understanding that. And long-term stress is often something that makes those things more likely. So if we have a little stressor in our life, I don't know. You're running late or something like that, that's going to be a little stress. But if you're caring for a loved one or something like that, that's going to be a long-term stressor. So that may have impacts over time that you're going to notice. So the longer something is in our life that's difficult, the more likely it can be that it's going to impact. So just being aware of it. And that's a normal thing to happen. We're going to feel that way if something really difficult is happening a long time. So stress can be triggered by things called stressors. So you can kind of read there. So common stressors include responsibilities in our daily lives, concerns about things outside of our control, going through changes in our life, events, unresolved issues in important areas of our life. So those are some things. I mean, we can probably all think of common stressors for us that happen. If any difficulty that we're seeing in our lives and we're reacting to, that's a stressor. If it's a difficult thing that you're not reacting to, I guess it's okay. It's not a stressor, but if it's impacting your life, then it is a stressor. And stressors can be related to things that we're personally dealing with, or it can be a combination of things that we're dealing with. So sometimes stress can be worse if stressors are kind of piggybacking on top of each other, and that can make it a lot worse. Let's say you're dealing with financial issues, and your child's getting in trouble at school, and now you got a car repair issue. Those are going to piggyback off each other, and they're going to start to feel more and more stress. They might all be kind of separate, but the more that they start to come together, you're going to feel more stress from those things. So it can be one thing, or it can be a combination of things. It doesn't have to be. All right, so stress can affect us in a lot of different ways. So kind of just getting an idea of how it looks when you're stressed. So concentration issues are a huge part of how stress can impact us. In fact, sometimes if stress can impact us to the point where we might have temporary memory issues. I'll share. Usually I'm really good at keeping up with my appointments, and I don't usually have to keep the calendar, but there was a summer where I had a lot going on, and I think I forgot I was working once, and it's pretty bad. And I was like, what is going on with me? But I had like 3 different jobs, and I was taking a class, and I was doing these things, and I realized I have to actually get a calendar. And then once the stressors resolved themselves, my memory went back to where it normally is. But the stress was so high, there was only so much my brain could do. So I can't expect so much of my brain. If it's doing 10 things normally, I can't expect its memory to be off. So concentration is a big one in how it can impact you. Regulating emotions. Oftentimes you might notice that you're a little bit quicker to tears, a little bit quicker to anger. You might get shaky a little bit easier. Any way that an emotion can come out, it might be expressed a little bit stronger than it would be normally. So if you're noticing, I'm having a lot of strong reactions, maybe ask yourself, is there something going on that's stressing me out? Is there something that I need to be aware of? It can cause changes in our sleeping and eating habits. So when we're stressed, so people deal with it very differently. So sometimes when people are stressed, they eat too much. So they, eat away their stress. Sometimes when people are stressed, they lose their appetite. So they can't eat very much at all. It can also change our sleeping habits. I think we can probably all know that a lot of times when you're feeling stressed, it's very hard to sleep. I know some people though, when they're stressed, it's hard to stay awake. I know that's a smaller part of the population, but it is a part of the population. So your sleep may be completely off. So you're staying up and you're having a hard time sleeping. You might find that you're worrying more. Those things can start to happen. Another thing, it can make depression, anxiety worse. I kind of talked about that, but it can also make other physical issues in our body worse. So I don't know, you might have noticed if you're going through a stressful time, pain actually hurts more. And that's something that's real. We're going to feel that a little bit more. Things in our body might get aggravated or inflamed a little bit easier because there are certain hormones that are released when we're under stress that are going to make those things a little bit more likely to happen. So our physical health might be impacted. I think we all probably know that if we're under a lot of stress, we're more likely to get sick. So that's just one way that stress can impact our physical health. You might notice cardiac symptoms. So it impacts so stress is hard on our cardiovascular system because a lot of times we're on high alert when we're under stress. So that turns everything on. So our heart will often feel that. So you might have palpitations, you might have chest pain, you might have some periods of increased heart rate. Those things can happen with stress. So being aware, if this is happening too long, too often, go see a doctor and make sure that your heart isn't being hurt too much by stress, because it can start to cause some long-term impacts. Low energy, and there's an increased use for substance use. So it makes sense. If you're stressed, you want to escape the stress, and a lot of substances have calming effects. The problem with using substances is that oftentimes many of the substances that make you feel better in the short term are going to make the symptoms a lot worse in the long term. So alcohol, marijuana, any of those things that kind of chill you out to start off with will increase anxiety. And we're going to talk about what anxiety is in a moment, but it will have that physiological effect on you. So it does give you that payoff in the beginning, but it is not a payoff that lasts. And then eventually it will make you more susceptible to stress and anxiety. So it's not really a great solution. So yeah, digestive problems are a huge issue, headaches too, but you'll probably notice that stomach problems might come with stress. If you're under stress, our gut tells us everything, and if we're under stress, you might notice that things might change there. Headaches is also a very common one that can happen for people as well. And I talked about the body pain, getting sick more often. Muscle tension and also jaw clenching can be a huge part of this. So when we are stressed, oftentimes we can just holding our body a little bit more, and you might even notice that you're clenching your jaw. Sometimes it can just be good to check in when you're under stress. If something difficult's going on, am I clenching my jaw, and just relaxing that? And that can sometimes be a cue to just try to relax your body as much. And it can impact our ability to function. So during times of very, very high stress, you might notice that it's hard to go to work, arguing a little bit more. You're having, again, maybe issues with sleep or even just motivation. So just being aware of how it impacts you. And here too, we can experience stress on an individual, family, or community or societal level. So I think it's important to understand stressors can come from a few different areas. So individual means something we're dealing with ourselves, just us. So it could be maybe something at work, if that doesn't impact your family. It could be a personal struggle that you're dealing with, and that could be a very real thing. It could be on a family level. Maybe a family member is sick, or you might be going through some relationship difficulties. Maybe a child is having some problems. That's where it would be on the community level. Might be maybe something's going on in your town or state that is really stressful and you're aware of, and it is causing you a stressor. And societal level, we actually had a societal level stressor very recently, which was the pandemic. So that's an example of a societal level stressor. So it can happen on any level. And even if I think sometimes we think that the only way it impacts us is maybe like individual and family, but community and societal have as much of an impact on us. If it's a stressor and if it's something that we're thinking about, that will cause us stress. So, yeah. Okay, so stress is usually a problem. So let me just, yeah, stress is usually a problem when we experience it too long and for too long and too often. Those are the two things that make it too much for us. So first, I'd like to talk about some of the different types of stress. So acute stress is something that occurs for a short period in our life, a few minutes to a couple of weeks. It's upsetting, but we're able to get through it. So here, kind of natural disaster, maybe like the death of a loved one or a pet or something like that. It's something in that moment. It's not ongoing. I'm not saying if it's the death of someone, grief is ongoing, but that's different than the stress, the immediate stress that's there. Chronic stress is something that continues to go on. So it can be something that's continuous, but it can also be something that maybe just comes back frequently. So maybe if I could say, maybe I could see where financial stress could maybe be cyclical if you have a seasonal job or your partner has a seasonal job. That financial stress might be a cyclical part of things. And so it's an ongoing stressor. Another form of chronic stress could be, I have caring for an elderly family member. That can be a chronic stressor. You might care about that person. You want the best for them. You want this to go that way. You want to be there for them, but it doesn't change that taking care of someone is very hard, and that is going to be a stressor. So our stress response is good if we need to deal with something in the moment. And here I kind of gave the example of like a job interview, you got to take a test. It gets our body and mind ready to do something. That's what stress is. It's going into doing mode. So when we're getting ready for something, stress is fine. It's helpful. It's useful in that moment. I'm sure you've had times where the stress motivated you to do something, got you through something, and was helpful in that moment. So in those short bursts of time, it's fine. The problem is we're not supposed to have it on all of the time. If it's on all of the time, that's where it starts to become a problem and it's taxing on our body. And I just want to say, so if you are experiencing a stress reaction from trauma, that is something separate. So it might have been, so it's related to a traumatic event. So I'm just going to go over what that is. Get extra help because we're not going to talk about trauma here, but I'm just giving you the basics so that you can kind of know, oh, this is outside of a normal stress response. This was more than just stress. This was actually trauma. And so kind of understanding what those two things are. There are two different kinds of trauma disorder. There's acute stress disorder, which is something, it happens 2 to 4 weeks after a traumatic event, and it has a criteria for more intrusive symptoms, but you're not diagnosing, so that is and then post-traumatic stress disorder is basically when it's lasted for more than a month and it's been going on for a long time. So just to know, trauma is the exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in one or more of the following ways. So directly experiencing the traumatic event, so you were the victim, witnessing in person the events as it occurred to others, so seeing an event, learning that the traumatic events occurred to a close friend or family member. So those things could also happen. And then experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to adverse details of traumatic events. It doesn't include media. This is more for first responders or people who work with people go through difficult things. They traumatized by hearing about other people's trauma repeatedly. So that is the definition of trauma. So if it's been something life-threatening or extremely dangerous to you or a loved one, that falls in the category of trauma. It is more than just stress. So just some basic symptoms. So trauma disorders include intrusive symptoms, which means intrusive thoughts, recurrent memories, kind of classic ideas of what we think of when we think of PTSD, dissociation, and you might try to avoid things that remind you of the trauma. The avoidance symptoms. So you're avoiding anything that reminds you. So if something really bad happened and you find like, I don't know, so let's say there was a car accident, that's often traumatic for people. If you find that you're avoiding the place where that accident happened, that you're having a really, that you don't even want to be near it, that might let you know you're having a stronger reaction. Altered mood symptoms, so you might not be able to remember what happened. You have negative beliefs about yourself and others. You have distorted views of the consequences of the traumatic event that led. So you might blame yourself for what's happening, and you might have a persistent negative. Also, there's also the reactivity symptoms. So if you notice that you're irritable or angry, that's something. If you're noticing that you are aggressive towards people, being self-destructive, hypervigilance, which means always aware of everything that's around you, kind of need to check things. You planned your way out of this room. When you got into this room, those things might let you know that you vigilance. If someone just taps you on the shoulder and you go, "Ooh," you might have an exaggerated startle response. So those. Right.
So what is anxiety? So basically, you can't separate the mind and the body. If you don't feel good physically, you're not going to feel good mentally. So kind of like stress, anxiety is normal. It's an emotion, just like happy, sad, all those different emotions. It's a normal emotion, and it affects any type of person. It doesn't discriminate, based on your sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, all of those things. It doesn't discriminate. So it can happen to anyone, basically. That's the point. And so anxiety is basically when you're worrying about something, and a lot of times anxiety is worrying about the potential threat about something. So anxiety sometimes can be like this little voice in your head that can tell you something bad is going to happen. So a lot of times it's trying to convince you that there's going to be negative experience, or something bad's going to happen, and so you start to really worry about it. And a lot of times anxiety is worrying about the future. A lot of times it's uncertainty about the future. I don't know what's going to happen, scared again. Uncertainty, the brain can go in all different directions with that. Also too, anxiety, a lot of times gets a bad reputation. So it's not all bad, so it is there to protect us, so it's basically a warning sign, a warning that something's going on, something's not feeling right with us, and trying to figure out what it is. So again, it is normal. So some examples of what is normal anxiety, or like healthy anxiety, you're going to feel anxious the night before you have an interview, or when, maybe if you have a friend or someone say, I need to talk to you. Most people are probably gonna be like, oh, what's that about? Like maybe when you have to give a presentation, you might feel a little anxious. So those are all normal, normal situations where it's, it makes sense to feel anxiety. But it's still not getting in someone's way to be able to function and to do it. So there's also productive anxiety, like some examples, again, that it can help you be productive, like it can help you meet a deadline. I think you need to share some of those things about stress as well. So again, it's not all bad. It definitely gets a bad reputation. So continued, and get into details, but so again, anxiety gets bad reputation. So survival, it turns into this, we call this fight or flight mode, freeze, and also in fawn, but that's trauma. So basically, if we're in the woods and a bear jumps out in front of us, if we don't have anxiety and we don't have that fight or flight response, we would die. We would sit there and bear would eat us and we would die. So in that situation, anxiety is good. Anxiety is telling us, whoa, this is scary. Something's wrong here. I need to get out of here. So in that aspect, it's telling us to move away from something our brain is perceiving, which is accurate in that situation, that a bear could kill us. So the problem is if you feel like that bear is in front of you all the time, when in reality it's not, that's when it can be turned into an anxiety disorder, or maybe even like PTSD. So again, you might, like Jeannie shared, with some stress is when people have PTSD, you might kind of always feel on guard, or always like extremely alert of your environment. Again, like you're trying to protect yourself all the time, like that bear is there, but it's really not there all the time. So that is kind of, showing that anxiety is normal. So anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States, affecting over 40 million adults, or 19.1% of the population. The most common mental illness in the world, and affecting roughly around 301 million people. So an estimate of 4% of the global population. So that's, the whole world. That's pretty big. That's the example there. So the perception belief example is just basically saying, let's say you're walking down an alley And your brain is telling you, and there's nothing, it's daytime and there's nothing really wrong with this alley, but your brain is starting to tell you that there's something wrong. It's perceiving the alley as some type of threat. So now your brain is telling you, now you're getting anxious, and maybe now you're getting some body symptoms, and now maybe you're starting to panic, all based on your perception that I'm walking down this alley and it's dangerous. Your brain's telling you that. You might not even be aware that that's what's going on. And a lot of times that's what can happen with anxiety too, is we have these automatic thoughts or even these kind of core beliefs that go on in our head and we're not aware of it. So again, you're walking down the alley and you're like, why is my heart racing so fast all of a sudden? Why am I getting like tunnel vision? And in your mind, if you think about it later, you might really be like, wow, I was perceiving that there might be some type of danger there, when in reality there wasn't. So kind of hand in hand with stress, if anxiety goes on for a long time, like chronic, and you don't get it treated, same thing with stress, it's going to have effects on your body, physically, mentally, all that. It's going to affect you in very similar ways as stress, your sleep, your appetite. Usually it's going to go one way or the other. You're eating too much, or you're not eating enough, or you're sleeping too much, or you're not sleeping enough, or somewhere in the mixture of all that. But it's definitely going to have an effect on your body. So again, like I said in the beginning, you can't separate the mind and the body, it's and vice versa. It's all connected. So being mindful of that. So these are just some symptoms. Of course, there's a bunch of different type of anxiety disorders if we're looking at like the DSM-5, but these are just some kind of general symptoms. So like feeling on edge, that's going to be like feeling tense all the time, like again, kind of on edge. Maybe you feel like you're, another phrase it can call like feeling like keyed up or just feeling tense all the time. Maybe you feel nervous. I mean, we all can feel nervous. That's normal, but when it's excessive and when it's chronic and when there's not like a specific reason to be there to feel nervous, that could be a sign of an anxiety disorder. So all these different symptoms could potentially be signs of anxiety. So that doesn't just mean if you're like, oh, boom, I have brain fog, I have heart racing, I feel an edge, boom, I have anxiety disorder. It's not that simple. There could be other reasons, but these are some symptoms. It is important to be mindful of, okay, is it anxiety? But I always say too, it's always important to rule out, is there a medical reason why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling? Is there a reason why I'm getting dizzy all the time? There could be a medical reason. It could be anxiety, but again, it's always a good idea with whatever it is. Do I have a medical condition? If you get testing done for what I'm dizzy all the time and you get testing and everything is fine, more than likely that's showing that it's psychological. So those are some symptoms of anxiety. And so this next one just is kind of a little blurb of different anxiety types. So these are like what would be in the DSM-5. So like having a phobia, PTSD, also a selective mutism, medical condition. So you can have a medical condition that can cause anxiety, basically. Medication anxiety disorder, social anxiety, panic attacks, separation anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, agoraphobia, generalized anxiety. So there's a lot of different types. So of course they're all going to be a little bit different, but they all fall under that anxiety umbrella. So the next part talks about the cycle of anxiety. So basically you have an event, something happens, and then you get a physical symptom because of that event. Maybe your heart is racing, again, you feel dizzy, or you're feeling confused, you're getting thoughts that go along with this thing that happened. Maybe you're having thoughts of, I can't handle this, why me, what if, and so having those thoughts too is going to help, it's going to put you resulting in feeling, in avoiding the event. Because when we avoid it, it makes us feel better in the short term. Oh, I have social anxiety, I have to get together with these people, friends, and yeah, they're friends, but I still don't really feel like going. So I'm going to avoid it. I'm just going to, I don't feel good. And maybe you don't, maybe it's a legitimate excuse. And that makes you feel better in the short term. Oh, phew, I don't have to deal with that. But in the long term, it makes anxiety chronic. And every time you avoid something, it makes anxiety bigger, bigger, and bigger. And then that anxiety has more control or power over you. And that's when it can start to really affect your life. It's when it starts to get big like that. So yeah, again, it does relieve, and feel better in short term, but not in the long term. And so the saying, oh, yeah, so I put that in there. The saying, you can't teach old dog new tricks is a myth. I hear that all the time. Oh, I'm this old or whatever. Yeah, you can't, again, teach an old dog new tricks. That is not true. So not true. So far from the truth. Anything that we learn, we can unlearn and relearn. It just takes energy. It just takes effort. It's hard, but it's possible. It's very possible. And if you think about all the energy and time you might invest, maybe not even willingly out of habit, and maybe just not even knowing about anxiety and, let's say, depression and stress, you're putting all this energy and effort into this thing, whatever it is, fighting it, when it's like, okay, well, maybe I could channel this in a different way. Like maybe I'm like, oh, I can't stop smoking, or I can't stop avoiding those social situations. I've done it my whole life. True, maybe that is true, but it is possible, is my point. So a lot of times we can get stuck in these habits, these unhealthy thinking patterns that we tell ourselves. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So then that leads into the next part, is what we call like CBT. So CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. So basically CBT says that whatever, it's not what happens to us in life, it's how we perceive it and it's what we do with it. So CBT is saying it's our thoughts are really causing our distress. It's really causing our anxiety. So yeah, so if we kind of look at the example there, the little triangle, so in the middle, it should say like something happened, like your event. So on here, I think the example I gave is I text my friend and she didn't respond. So that's just a boom, very simple example. So we're going to look at like, that's a fact, so if we're again breaking it down like that, that's a fact. There's no judgment in there. It's just I text my friend, she didn't respond, boom. That's the trigger, what we call a triggering event. Then after that, maybe you get a thought of she hates me. I text her, she didn't text me back. She hates me. Now, because of that thought, so it goes around, now you're feeling sad. And maybe that means you're going in your room and you're crying and you don't want to get out of bed. And now it's been 3 days and, you can't get out of bed. And that was the behavior. So it's all a domino effect. So our thoughts have huge effect on how we feel and how we behave. Because more than likely, that situation isn't going to happen to us once, whether it's that specific situation or not. There's going to be so many different things that happen to us in our life. And if we interpret it in, just that one example in that way, and then that's how we react as a result of it, we're going to be in trouble. I mean, so if you look at that, okay, my friend didn't text me back, like, does that mean she hates me? Is that fact? It could be a possibility. Yeah, sure, it could be. But there probably could be 10 other reasons why she didn't text you back either. But our brain, when we have anxiety, we don't have things kind of spelled out, we can kind of take it personal and think that way. And then we're crying, nobody cares about me, and oh, why do I bother, and all this stuff. And then, and now you're calling out of work, and now it continues. And then maybe something else happens, whether it's that or now it's, let's say, road rage. That's a very common one. Even if it's not full-blown road rage. Let's say you're driving, and then all of a sudden someone cuts you off. And the first thought you have is like, they're such a jerk. They only care about themselves. And then as a result of that, now you're feeling really disrespected. That's going to be maybe like that underlining feeling. And you're going to be feeling really angry. As a result of that, maybe you're following them. Maybe you're flicking them off. Maybe sometimes these things turn into like actual fights, like all stemming from that, not even just that the person cut you off, your perception of what happened. They cut me off and I perceived that as them like being a jerk and making it personal. When in reality, again, if we look at it, like, is that the only reason why they cut you off? Not. More than likely, we've probably done it before. Maybe maybe they were just in their own world and they weren't paying attention and it was a mistake. Maybe they really are a jerk. That also is a possibility. Maybe their brakes weren't working. Maybe they didn't see you. Maybe they were so into their music. I mean, who knows is the point. But with anxiety, we get stuck on this like theory, in this theory of it being something negative, and then we go in that direction, treating it as if it's already happening or if it's going to happen when it didn't. So CBT is huge, especially, for anxiety, but for anything, you struggle with depression, stress, looking at, what happened, what your brain is saying to you, how you're responding to it, and then the feelings and behaviors as well. So that's going to be huge. So some ways it talks about coping with challenging what they call like thinking mistakes, because there's a lot of different, like we could call them cognitive distortions or unhealthy thinking patterns. We didn't get into all that, but there's a lot of. But so first you would kind of look at, to keep it simple, you can look at, is my thought, is this a fact? My friend didn't text me back, she hates me. Is that a fact? No. Are my thoughts, are they helpful? Am I falling into a thinking mistake trap again? Kind of those cognitive distortions, or if we have time, maybe we can talk about it more. because that is really important too. What can I say to myself that would be more accurate, positive, or helpful? Because again, we say these things to ourselves, and we can kind of put ourselves in a worse direction versus what really happened. And could there be another reason why they didn't text you back besides she hates me? So trying to look at alternative reasons. So again, CBT is going to be for anxiety, but really anything in life. So the sooner you can kind of understand that and start to become more aware, mindful of your thoughts, the more you're going to feel in control. And the less that little anxiety voice is going to like that, but then you're going to have more control. Okay, so let's see. Oh, so we go back to
All right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about self-care. Self-care is the important foundation for managing stress and anxiety. If we aren't taking care of ourselves at a base level, it's going to be very hard to manage either of those things. So we're just going to talk about some basic ways to think. So these are the three big ones that we probably all know, but they are important. So having good sleep hygiene. So making sure we're having healthy sleep. Some basic aspects of healthy sleep are 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And I actually just recently watched something that sorry, I know you're a guy and you're here, but if you're menstruating, women actually need an extra hour of sleep. So women can during that time in their life, maybe need 10 hours of sleep. Trying to make your sleep and wake time the same every day. I know people like to sleep in on the weekends and all of that stuff, but if we want to be healthy, we should try to keep it as much to within an hour or half hour of the same time. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but we want to keep it so our circadian rhythms aren't changing too much. Making sure our bed is limited to mostly relaxing activities, not eating in our bed, not working in our beds, not doing any type of waking activities, because if we start to do all those things in our beds, our body doesn't really recognize that this is a place for sleep. It's just like, this is the place where I live my life, and sometimes I happen to sleep here too. So try to make it a sanctuary for sleep. Make sure it's a good sleep environment for you. That's different for everyone based on everyone's circumstances. I think a lot of people tend to like a cool, dark environment. That tends to be what people like, but some people don't. If you have a history of trauma, being in the dark is probably sometimes a very hard thing to do. So a nightlight's fine. Sometimes you may need to fall asleep with like a radio or something. I know that's not always the best, but if you have trauma, it might be hard to sleep without a background noise. And maybe like a nightlight or something like that. So understanding your circumstances, but cool and dark seem to be better for us. So making sure we do that. If you're having trouble sleeping, I gave some ideas. Guided meditations tend to work for people, but even sleep stories, I know Audible has them, but I think they're even on YouTube too. They're just soothing stories that someone's telling, doing gentle or restorative yoga. Some people do herbal teas before bed, or even just like deep breathing exercises can be really important. Sometimes even some essential oils can be soothing or something like that. And then, try to get outside once a day. It's important for our body to link to the sun. Our sleep is it's related to our circadian rhythms, which has a lot to do with the sun. So if we can try to just link up with the sun at least once during the day, that can help us sleep. And then having healthy eating habits, eating 3 to 5 meals a day. I'm not a nutritionist, but these are just the basic things you can find anywhere. So making sure you're eating plenty of grains, lean protein, unsaturated fats, and lots of fruits and vegetables. And if we're, and just those other foods like sugar and, saturated fats, those are sometimes foods, not always foods. I'm not a person who says something never, it's just sometimes or more. So there's certain foods we can have more and some we can have some. Making sure we drink a lot of water. Sometimes we think we're hungry when we're actually thirsty. So if you're well hydrated, it will not mix those things up. Trying not to snack and try not to eat too close to bed. We're eating, trying to have our last meal at least 3 hours before we go to bed. If if you need a small snack because you're hungry, that's fine. But just trying not to eat a huge meal before bed, because your body is going to have to do a ton of work while it's sleeping, and it's not going to be a restful sleep. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I know that if I have a huge meal before bed, I'm going to have wild dreams. So, and that's not going to be a restful night's sleep. And moving regularly. exercise is so important for our just general health. It can help improve our mood. It's not going to fix our mood, but it can help improve our mood. It gives us all sorts of good chemicals in our brain that can be very helpful. So it's just very good for us. There's even just the part of like, even if you're just walking regularly, there's a lot of studies about bilateral stimulation, which means we're moving both parts of our body at the same time and the soothing effects of that. So those can be helpful for us. I always say just start off with what you will do and build from there. Sometimes people start off with huge goals and then you disappoint yourself when you can't do it. If you're struggling to leave the couch regularly, it might be a 5-minute walk where you're starting with, and then you can start to build on that from there. But just making sure you're moving regularly. And sometimes you can just work in physical activity. I know if you do a lot of gardening, you're probably going to be doing a lot of physical activity. If you have little ones, you are doing a lot of physical activity. So sometimes movement is built into our lives. All right. Making time for relaxation. So our bodies do need to come to rest, and that's going to be part of us learning how to turn the switch from on to off. And this is figuring out how you like to relax. There's common ways that people like to relax. There's meditation, probably reading is a very common one. Baths, people love baths, doing some light stretching, puzzles. Whatever they are, it's a low energy activity that helps you feel less engaged. And well, it's engaging your parasympathetic system, which is your calming system. So there's one that's I think it's our sympathetic system is our on switch, and our parasympathetic system is our off switch. So we want to bring that in. Other things that can be good for that is like knitting or crocheting or cross stitch or any of those things. Woodworking. I'm trying to think about anything that's soothing for you is what's important. So figuring that out. Some people, it is just sitting and chilling out. I remember I did a group once. Someone yelled at me that they were never going to do that. So it's like you can relax in other ways too. And if you're knitting, if you're doing a crossword, those things are still soothing. As long as you're feeling that kind of your heart rate's going down, that's that kind of slack feeling in your muscles, that feeling of calm, that's what you're trying to elicit. And making sure you're taking care of yourself and your environment. A lot of times when we're under stress or anxiety, start to neglect ourselves and our environment. So making sure you're bathing regularly, you're brushing your teeth, you're doing all these things. It's important to keep up with these things because they're the things that let us know we're well and that we're taking care of ourselves. So if we're not doing those things, we're going to pick up on that. So making sure you're taking that shower, brushing your hair, all this. Our environment's the same thing. I'm sure you all probably know when you're under a lot of stress, your environment starts to look crazy. So if you can do some light picking up or making sure that if there's like a sanctuary in your home that needs to be tidy, make sure that's tidy. I know one person I worked with, like their kitchen table was really messed up. They knew that things weren't okay. So they needed to make sure that their kitchen table was not really messed up. So just being aware, and that can also let you know that you're not doing well. So you're like, I'm just feeling not good. And then you look at your kitchen table and you're like, I know what's going on. So that can kind of also help you. So making sure you're keeping up with those things. This is the physical self-care. And so there's another part for emotional self-care. So we want to practice self-compassion. Self-compassion is treating ourselves with kindness rather than harshness. So a lot of times when we're struggling, we might fall into a habit of wanting to scold ourselves or speak badly to ourselves. We call that negative self-talk. We want to try to be our friend to ourselves. So if we think about it, if we see a friend struggling, we don't go, you're so stupid, you can't do anything right, what's wrong with you? We would just not even think of saying those things. But oftentimes, if we're struggling, we say those very things to ourselves. So one thing you can often use to try to switch that narrative is actually pretend you're talking to someone that you love very much or a small child. That will shift the way we'll speak to ourselves. Because we might give ourselves permission to talk poorly to ourselves, but we often don't give ourselves that same permission for others. So that might actually help you learn what that voice might look like, because I know if you're used to a very negative voice for a long time, it can be hard to imagine that positive voice. If we can imagine talking to someone we love, that sometimes can allow that to come in. Yeah, validate your feelings. So if you're going through a hard time, validate that it's a hard time and why these feelings make sense. That helps us cope a little better. If we are saying, I shouldn't feel this way, this isn't the way I should be dealing with this. Well, okay, that's not what's happening. So being aware that this is how you're dealing with it, you might want to deal with it differently, but validating is the first step to trying to change something. If we try to pretend that something isn't happening, it's going to be really hard to make that any better. Like if you're going, I'm not sad, but you're sad, your body and mind know that you're lying. So don't lie. And you can start to kind of do this. Journaling is one way, talking to a friend that you know is supportive. So if you know that that friend is not supportive, do not talk to them. And sometimes actually crying can be a way to validate our emotions. There's a lot of studies about if we allow ourselves to cry with the emotion, we can cry many of our emotions out. So that actually helps us feel it a little bit deeper if we're in a situation where we can't cry. That's not always possible. Being creative, making sure that we're giving time to express our creative side. We want to give both sides of our brain a little bit of time. So creativity is the space where the right side of our brain can do something. What's important about that is we figure out problems a little bit differently than we do on the other side of our brain. They're both really important and we need both of them, but sometimes our lives are a little bit more thinking focused, more problem solving and stuff like that. And so we don't always engage the other part. So being creative can actually help us feel better because it elicits that part of us that likes to play, that likes to do things just for fun. And that's an important part of our lives too. Once a day, do something that makes you feel in control or you can complete. When you are going through hard time, I mean, this is just good for every day, but then especially when you're going through hard times, things can feel out of control and things may actually be out of control. In certain stressful situations, let's say you're dealing with a natural disaster, probably a lot of stuff feels out of control. So it might be trying to find one thing that you're in control of. So maybe in the natural disaster, the one thing you have control over is you can go to the place to get water and come back. That's something you have control over. So during times where it feels like you don't have a lot of control, try to identify something you do have control over. And some examples are like paying a bill, cleaning your house, making your bed. There's something that you can tangibly do that makes you feel less out of. And then stick with your daily routine as much as possible. So sometimes when we're struggling with stress, we'll start to push things off or things that were healthy parts of our routine we'll stop doing. Keep doing the essentials. So there might be things that have to be left by the wayside, but if there's this bedtime routine that helps you know that you're getting ready for bed and this is really important, don't let that drop off. So you know, take a shower and whatever, like try to figure out one place where you can preserve some of your routine, because routine helps us know what to anticipate next. So during times of high anxiety or stress, we want to at least give ourselves some ability to anticipate some things. And it also makes it so that we don't have to make as many decisions. So that can be helpful too, because decisions are stressful and they can so getting support. So the first one is talk it out. I think this is the one we know the most. So call someone, talk to them about what's going on. If you've talked about it too much, sometimes listening to someone else can be helpful, but just having that genuine connection with someone can be very helpful. I think a big thing is try to find someone you feel comfortable being vulnerable with. That allows us to express ourselves more fully and get the help that we really need. Asking for help. So if there's something we cannot do, asking for help. Yep. So just making sure, and if you're not used to it, get in the habit. And what I like to say is start small. So if you're not asking for a lot of help, it might be, okay, I'm going to ask someone to help me bring in the groceries. If you're struggling with asking for help, start small, and then you can build from there. Some people can get out of the habit or never have been in the habit of asking for help. So it feels very uncomfortable. So any new habit, we just have to slowly build, start to make it a new, better habit for ourselves. And we can do that is by actually asking. And the discomfort in this situation may just be telling you you're not used to it. It doesn't mean it's bad. So that's also important. Discomfort doesn't always tell us it's bad. It can sometimes just tell us, I'm not used to doing this. And staying connected. So make time to be around people. A lot of studies continuously show the important effects of being connected to people. And in fact, if you have a good network of people or people you're connected to and you're struggling with a mental health condition, you have stronger outgains or stronger gains, outcomes if you have a network of people. So making sure you make time for the people that are already in your life. So making sure you might see them weekly or monthly or every 2 months, but making sure you're seeing them regularly. Join a group, club, church, any number of things to be around people. You can volunteer. That's another way to be around people. But just making sure you're making time to be with people. That is very important for us. We are social beings. We are not felines. We do not thrive alone. We actually, if you think about it, humans, a form of torture from us is to be alone. So that's how important being around. Utilize your supports appropriately. So there are 3 types of support. So there's emotional, informative, and instrumental. So emotional is when you can talk to someone, they're there for you, they're a good listener, that type of support. Informative, this is a person that relays information. They're very good at telling you what's going on. And then there's instrumental, which is practical help, like changing a tire, or like you might need help with something. Be aware of what the people in your lives are good at. Like if you have someone who's super good at instrumental help, so let's say, I don't know, my dad, he's great at instrumental help. If I need my tire changed or anything, he's there. My dad will listen to me, he cares me. His bag is not emotional help as much. So just being aware, because if you're going to someone who's maybe the informative person in your life, but not necessarily the emotional support, and you're going to them for emotional support and they're not giving it to you, that just might not be what they have been able to provide you. So they might not be the right person for that. So just kind of getting an idea of like, what kind of help do the people in my life provide? And make sure that you don't concentrate your going to just maybe 1 or 2 people. That will burn people out. So trying to have a group of people that you can turn to for support is important. I would say if you can have 3 to 5 people, that's good. But if you don't have 3 to 5 people, there are all of these numbers of places you can call and start to reach out to people when you need help. So making sure you're talking to people regularly and you're getting that support, but making sure you're trying to talk to a few different people. So it could be, you know, even like maybe your son, your parents, and then maybe your therapist. Those might be the 3 people, and that's okay. But just making sure you're spreading it between a few different people, and also maybe spreading it to what type of help each person can provide appropriately. And those are just some different outreach lines for different types of help. That
shifting back to me, just some ways kind of overlap with some of the, things Jeannie talked about, but just some ways to cope with anxiety. So like we talked about CBT, kind of the thoughts affect how we feel and how we behave. Something called exposure therapy. That's something you would do in individual therapy if you have like panic attacks, or if you have like, or, intense fear of a specific phobia like spiders or driving. That would be something you could do there. Relaxation skills, like Jeannie kind of mentioned, like deep breathing, meditation, yoga, keeping physically active. Again, kind of similar stuff that Jeannie mentioned. Avoiding alcohol and recreational drugs, quitting, smoking or trying to cut back. Caffeine, caffeinated beverages. If you like chocolate, don't forget that has caffeine in it. Not saying you can't have it, everything in moderation. It is in the food pyramid. So in my opinion, we do need it, but moderation and caffeine will increase anxiety. So if you're having, 5 cups of coffee a day and the Snickers bar and soda and you're extra anxious, well, looking at that. So trying to monitor how much, caffeine you're having, making sleep a priority, healthy food. Yeah, stuff we already talk about, learn about whatever, if you're diagnosed with a disorder, or they're saying you're struggling with just some anxiety, maybe doesn't fit a disorder, the full criteria, just learning more about it to help yourself come up with a treatment plan, stick to it. Looking at what are your triggers, what's triggering my anxiety, that's gonna be key. Journaling, maybe socializing. And lastly, humor. So just a little blurb, a little joke there. So a client to a doctor, the client said, I have ringing in my ears. And the doctor said, don't answer. Just a little humor. And say, yeah, make some people laugh with a smile on their face. Just something so simple as that. But that is the way they say to cope with anxiety and stress. And then another one is, if you think nobody cares about you, try missing a couple of payments. Any type of payment. Finding a little humor. And so, yeah, laughing can help with reducing stress, lowering your blood pressure, elevate mood, boost your immune system, improve brain functioning, protect the heart, connect you to others, faster instant relaxation, make you feel good. It can also have biochemical changes, by decreasing stress hormones and increase infection fighting antibodies. So help you, your body be better. Help improve brain functioning. Just hand in hand, improve mental health and emotional health. Teaches us perspective by teaching people to see reality rather than the distortion. So sometimes our stress or anxiety can make us see things a certain way, and it's not in reality that way. And just another little laughing factor, doctor to client, you live to be 60. Client, I am 60. Doctor said, see, I told you. Yeah, just silly humor. Yeah, so it's just the little things in life, right? And so, yeah, of course, we're talking about stress, anxiety, and then resilience, of course, comes to mind too. So this is going to be huge. So when we talk about resilience, it's talking about the process of basically adapting well when stuff happens in our life. That saying, I think I said it before, but to me, it just makes a lot of sense. It's not always what happens to us, it's what we do with it. It's how we perceive it, how we're going to respond to it. So when you're in the face of stressors, traumas, tragedy, how are you going to respond to it? It's going to be huge, kind of like perseverance as well. So it helps you to handle stress in a more positive way. And a little blurb I liked about Thomas Edison. So before finally inventing the light bulb, Thomas Edison failed over 10,000 times, that's not a typo, 10,000 times in his efforts. When interviewed about this, he stated, I have not failed once. I have succeeded in proving that those 10,000 ways will not work. When I have eliminated the ways that will not work, I will find the ways that will. So I don't know about you, but to me, that's like, wow. I mean, 10,000 times to do something again. I do something like 5 times. All right, that's it. But 10,000 times. I mean, wow. And so again, look at just the way he worded that. To me, that's like CBT right there, and it's so again, perspective. Like, it's not that I failed. It's just I found 10,000 ways that don't work. And now I'm going to continue, again, perseverance, resilience, to keep going and finding a way that will work. So to me, that was just kind of inspirational and explains emotional resilience. And so just some tips for resilience is, focusing on what you can control, not what's out of your control. There's a lot of things in life we can't control. So we do want to focus on the things we can, which is some of the stuff Jeannie talked about. Well, what we put in our body, what we're eating, the food, substances, exercise, sleep. These are things that we can control, to some extent. So we want to focus on some of those things. Use whatever happens to you in your life as a learning experience, trying not to beat yourself up over things that maybe didn't like that you did from the past. Alter your perception. Maybe that means you need to talk to other people to kind of get a different perspective. Limit the hostility factor. So, we can harbor or fester a lot of anger with whatever it is that happens in life, and that really just is going to affect us. So it's really, it's not going to affect whoever wronged us or whatever it is. So trying to work through that, ideally. Strive for goodness, not perfection. Develop compassion, develop good self-care habits. Don't isolate. So connect, look for the humor in things, develop mindfulness, live in the present moment, and not ruminating about the past or just maybe things that you didn't do. And seek out, sources of inspiration.
So cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of the benchmark of a lot of current psychotherapy. But So what Christina was just talking about is what we like to call the first waves CBT, which is want to confront our thinking. We want to be aware of our cognitive distortions and things like that so that we can change our thinking. Since then, they've come up with some different ways of practicing CBT as well. And so this is, I think, a third wave. This is, we are trying to be mindful of our thoughts and then let go of them. So, so basically it's not evaluating whether, so it's a little bit different than the first wave CBT. We're not evaluating whether it's factual, true, anything. We're just noticing that it's not helpful for us. And we're going to try to shift our attention away from it. So it might, and so how we might know something isn't helpful is getting more tense the more you're thinking about it. You can't stop thinking about it. So those are some indications. So you're going to observe your thoughts, and here's some different ways of observing your thoughts. Big thing, don't suppress your thoughts. I think we all know if you try to suppress something in your mind, it just comes back 10 times stronger. There's actually a thing they do in psychology classes where the teacher goes up front, goes, don't think about a pink elephant, then does the lecture. I was like, how much did you guys think about that pink elephant? So that's why we don't want to suppress thoughts. The next one is adopt a curious mind. So we're going to try to be curious rather than judgmental or analyzing. So we're going to ask questions like, where are these thoughts coming from? What's going on? We're just going to kind of be like a Columbo with ourselves. We're going to try to be like, why is this happening? No judgment. That's very key to all of this. Remember, you are not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. So a lot of times it can feel like you are your thoughts. They are all of us. But reminding ourselves that if we are thinking things in an ineffective way, that's not helping us. So, I mean, there's some different ways of looking. We've had different thoughts. We've had different ideas. So remembering that we are not one state of mind, right there. Do not block or suppress thoughts. And so what you do is you try to be aware of it, and then we try to find different ways of letting it go that works for you. So one thing could be just being aware of them and observing them and just not attaching to them. So it could be as a thought comes in, you go, oh, this thought, and then, I don't know, let's say you're worried about something at work. You might be like, that's a worry thought. So you're going to label it and just kind of, and sometimes when we label things, that can just put it in its place and it allows our brain to stop. Ask the question, where did that thought come from? Sometimes visualization can work. We use this a lot in CBT, kind of the helicopter effect, like viewing yourself from above as like those thoughts coming and going. And the next one is a kind of body scan activity where you might scan your body, scan your thoughts, scan your body, scan your emotions. So you're going to move back and forth between each of those so that you don't attach to either, gaining information from all, but you're not staying with any of them. We can change our tone of voice, so then it just makes it kind of silly. So there's lots of different ideas. So we're just making it just a thought in this way. We're like taking the charge away from it. We don't know what opposite action is, but opposite action is just behaving as if this wasn't happening. So it might be, or as if you were feeling the way you want to be feeling. That's kind of, so you're feeling calmer. So you might relax your face and body. You might do kind of like the magic question, like, what would I do if I didn't feel this way? So you might go do that. And then these are just some different imagery ways. Conveyor belt. So you can imagine that the thought is on a conveyor belt, it goes away from you. Logs in a river is another one, leaves down, falling off the tree, just so you can visualize the thought actually leaving. Some people like, it's like a push broom that they push out of their brain, just something that visualizes the thought leaving your brain. So it's a different way of handling thought. So yeah.